Hi, and welcome to a small, medium, at large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Heisen, bringing you intimate interviews beyond normal boundaries. I want to thank my son Richard for producing the show, and I want to thank my daughter Nancy for posting it on YouTube, Spotify, Google and Apple Podcasts, and other social media sites. I want to thank all you listeners for joining us. We've done over 90 shows. We're starting our fourth year, and we love hearing from you. So please keep sending those comments, liking, sharing, and subscribing. So let me tell you about our special guest today. Sunshine Grace is a storyteller and spiritual medium whose mission is to speak from the heart above the intersection between mental health and spirituality in order to help others. The voice she hears, she refers to as spirit. Spirit communications, Spirit communicates profound teachings to her on a regular basis in her dreams, in messages while awake, and whenever she attends a plant medicine ceremony. Although Sunshine's initial awakening felt like a destabilizing shamanic curse, she now considers her gifts of clairaudience, clairsentience, and clairvoyance as both a blessing and a huge responsibility to stay humble while helping others with her voice. Sunshine is honored to share Spirit's teachings and cares deeply about the suffering of others. Sunshine has a master's degree in research psychology, is a veteran, a mother, a world traveler, and loves prehistory, physics, and philosophy. Sunshine identifies as a non secular omnist. When she's not learning and practicing, you can find her in Austin's honky tonks dancing the Texas two step with her friends. Let's welcome Sunshine here today. Hi, Sunshine.
So nice to be here, Gail. It's really
It's
beautiful
great.
to hear that. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction.
It's great to see you, and you do have a wonderful sunshiny glow smile. So
Oh,
good,
thank
good
you.
choice.
Thank you so much. Your emails have been so sweet. I light up every time I read you say, I love greeting you in the morning with sunshine.
Yes, it's like a happy way to just wake up. So this is the question I ask all my podcast people the first time they come on. And that is to express to us what your childhood was like and if it led you down the path of spiritual mediumship that you are on today. I find that some people have families that supported them since they're little and that have helped them to continue in the fields that they're in because their families believed in these things. Then I have other people I've interviewed where in their family it was taboo. You don't say you hear voices, you don't say you see things, and you just follow their rules and whatever is set for that. And some of that made people lead to onto the path that they're on. But I feel that there are things that could have happened in the childhoods that maybe direct us to where we're going today and where we are now. And I was wondering if you could reflect on that.
That's a great question, Gail. I'm going to grab my phone because I write down all the messages I get from Spirit.
Mhm.
And what you asked made me think of something that I received actually last night as I was falling asleep. So I'll weave that in here in a moment. But, it's a really good question. I think it's probably flipped around for me. So my father passed when I was young. So I was raised by my mom and have an older brother and younger sister. And my mom has always been spiritually open. And I regret that my bias towards, the view of reality was totally on the other side of her. And maybe it was, me forming my own identity and seeing her so, woo woo is what I would think, what I would have called her back then. Um, she would sleep with crystals and probably still does with crystals underneath her pillow and do tarot cards and etc. And it just never made sense to me. I,
Wow, that's wonderful.
yeah, what made sense to me was that I would know when a friend was going to call, or I would get these, I had some really vivid dreams as a kid about flying that went on for a couple of years where I kind of like I think of that flying as a metaphor, right? Um, so I've always had a connection to the spiritual world. I can say that now in my late 40s, but as a kid, you don't know that that's different, right?
Right,
And
I called it flying also. That was I didn't know what to call that when you could go around your house and see everything that was going on, but your body was sleeping in bed. So I
yeah,
called it
astro
flying.
travel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have that kind of experience, so that's really cool. But I had some out of body experience with um, night, or what is it, date when you're daydreaming and you're walking, right? So I had these kind of like experiences that kind of point to the fact that I was sensitive, or I think of the material world in simple terms as one circle and the spiritual world in another circle, and there's like this veil. And so these experiences I would have pointed to the fact that I kind of lived kind of close to that veil, but I
Mhm.
never, I didn't know anything in any way, anything different. And then, you go to school and the conditioning begins that this is reality and that's not. And my life took me on a very different path. And eventually, in my early 20s, my brother met a woman who's my sister-in-law now, and she is very much like my mom. My sister-in-law, Jen, has always been, spiritually inclined. And I remember I have so much respect for her, but I remember thinking at the time I was going further in the other direction. I was having, I had an experience where I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater with religion and went to and identified as an atheist, even though I had dabbled in Buddhism and meditation and always been interested in world religions. Personally, there was that big wound there. So I identified as a scientific atheist in my, gosh, I think it was from like 28 to 46. And and meanwhile, during those, what, 18 years, I would, every once in a while have an experience that, you know, I didn't get curious about them. Like on my wedding day, I'm standing there. Sorry to my ex-husband if he's ever going to watch this, but getting ready to walk down the aisle and marry this beautiful man. And my sister's on one side, my brother's on another. And it's the first time that I ever remember hearing a voice that wasn't mine. And I think I was around 30. And the voice said, as I'm standing there in this park with all the people I love at the end of this, little sidewalk in a white dress, and the voice says, "This is not forever."
Mm.
And that was, and then I would have other experiences. I was in the Navy, then on an aircraft carrier, and we were off the coast.
That's one of my questions for you. What propelled you to to want to become involved in the military? It just seems so, I'm just curious how that happened.
I will come back to that, because if you pull that thread, Gail, we're going to go down a rabbit hole. But but I was on that ship and we were doing donuts off the coast of Florida for what was supposed to be a 3-day out and back. We were stationed in Norfolk, and 9/11 happened. And the night before 9/11, I saw a person in the rubble
Mm.
in my dreams, and he was still awake and asking for help with bricks all around him. And so these really powerful. I moved to Austin, and in 20, I think it was 2019, 2018, I dropped a friend off downtown for a concert, after a concert, and was driving to the suburbs for home, and came upon a multi-car accident that I had dreamed about a few days earlier. And luckily, because I had had the dream, it kind of primed me to respond really quickly. I was the first person on the scene. So it allowed me to not slam into that pile of cars, and then to get, first responders there, and to keep the traffic behind me from becoming a pile on. And so that was the turning point for me. I mean, I was still an atheist, and I remember calling my brother, and I was telling him, like, I'm tripping out. Like, how do we know something without knowing it? Like, how did I have that dream? It really kind of was the first thread I pulled outside of materialism.
Mhm.
And 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 so, yeah, and that's important to me now, because when I think about spiritual awakenings and I think about waking up to the true nature of our reality, which, I lean towards Buddhism. I'm not a study Buddhist, but I lean towards Buddhism as probably the wisdom tradition I'm most comfortable with. And so I think of the true nature of reality as a unified field of consciousness. I think if that's what we all are, we're all literally one, right? The Great Spirit is in everything. And it's more than we're just connected. We literally are one. Kind of like the Hindus, the wave, the ocean, and these are the waves. We think we're the waves, but we're really the ocean, right? Expressing as waves. And so as I, as I kind of went from one side to the other side of the spectrum, I in the hardest part of my own journey, my mom was the only person really that was like a huge support for me during the crisis period, which lasted a year and 9 months. So I would call her up, and she's the only person that I didn't feel crazy with. I could talk freely about my experiences. And I knew she wasn't judging me. It maybe didn't make sense to her, but she wasn't judging me. And that's a really mature place to be, when you may not completely understand someone, but you assume that it's true for them. And that was a huge gift. And I've laughed at myself many times in my own spiritual awakening journey, which of course I'm still on and it doesn't end, but that I've been on the other side of the spectrum and thought to myself, like, these people over there, they're just I'm glad they make themselves feel comfortable. It was, and now I'm over here. It's very humbling, to go from one belief system to another. It's very humbling, which is always a good thing.
I just have to say to you, my father raised us atheists, and he came from a not Orthodox Jewish family, but practicing. My grandparents had a kosher home, milchik and fleishik. You didn't mix milk and meat on a plate or with a fork or any of that. And that upbringing, I guess, he was not willing to accept that religious type of life, and he went the atheist route. And I've always been so grateful and thankful to him for that, because I didn't have any kind of religious dogma or whatever shoved in me about anything. The most thing we were exposed to was meditation and yoga and Hindu and Buddhist traditions, but nothing. There was no. We didn't go to temple. We didn't go to a church. We didn't do any kind of religious things. And then I, in turn, raised my children and family the same way. But I've always felt that I never wanted to dictate to my children how they should be. I always said to them, my personal feeling is I believe in the universe and that there's a powerful force out there, but I don't have it attached to a man's name or a person or a thing. In shamanism, I've been taught about the god of the sun and the god of water and nature, and that feels very compatible to me, and that those things that we need to live. And so I've always been very grateful, because I think that being raised that way, you were able to think more open and clearly. And so I said to them, if you want to go to church, I'll drive you to church and you can check it out. I'll take you to a Jewish synagogue if you want to go there. I want to expose you to all the different things so you can check them out and see. And so I sent my daughter, she wanted to go with her friends to some Christian thing that you do on the weekends or whatever. She came back and she said, yep, that's not for me. But I didn't ever feel that I should say, oh no, this is the way. I feel like, maybe one of them wanted to follow Jesus or wanted to become a religious Jew, or I don't think you should stand in that way for that. I think they should be able to discover what they want. And I have to say, in researching you before having you on the show today, I had never heard of the term non-secular omnist, which you wrote about in your bio. So I had to look up what it means, and I'm just going to read the 2 sentences for our audience, because when I read it, I said, wait, I think she picked the perfect thing for me. And it says, omnism beliefs suggest that every religion is an interpretation of universal truth and spiritual origins. Each religion contains wisdom, and no religion is necessarily right or wrong. They're all the same, packaged, wrapped in different styled papers. Omnism beliefs are beginning to seep into mainstream society as a growing number of people are seeking spirituality without labels or division, or more free expression of spirituality that isn't blanketed by doctrines and pretentiousness. I took that off of the web. That's a quote from the web when I typed that in because I said, I don't know what she's talking about. What is this? And I thought that was the best description of how I would feel about my feelings towards, I didn't even think there was a word for it, but I feel like and if I had to pick one, Buddhism would be the one I feel the most inclined towards. But there's things that you hear about in Christianity and things you hear about in Judaism and things you hear about in Muslim. I mean, in the Quran, all these things have wonderful teachings to offer. And I just was so pleased that you taught me this, that there's a word for this. So I
Oh,
don't know if I should start saying, yes, I'm a non-secular omnist anymore, but that's my new.
if it fits, wear it proudly. That's great,
No,
Gail.
I just want to say thank you. That was a great thing to learn about.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's so, language is so powerful when we find a single word that like that contains so much depth that we can relate to. It is so liberating. It like it frees us to know that that is a real thing. How we feel is a real thing. There's even a word for it.
And that's exactly how I felt. I said, wait a minute, there's a word I didn't even know. So it's a good thing I have a podcast so I can learn these things. I would have never known had we not had you on. So I have some questions here that I might be skipping around a little, but I was just curious as to one quickie question is what type of work you were doing when you were in the material world. I know you said you were in the Navy, but I was wondering what you were doing because it could be completely opposite from what you're doing now, and I was just curious what that was.
Yeah, that's a thanks, Gail, for the question. I'm laughing because I'm laughing because I've lived such an entertaining life. I swear I've lived when people hear, just parts of my life, they're like, have you lived a million lives in this lifetime? Um they're totally unrelated. So to make it simple, I graduated high school a year early. I think I turned 17 right before or after graduation, and I was hell bent on going to the university I had a partial ride in English at Arizona State University. But things didn't work out that way. I became homeless right after I graduated, was living out of my car, too embarrassed to ask for help,
Mm.
and bopped around for a few years, really didn't have any network or safety network, worked my butt off just to survive, and couch surfed some of that, had an apartment here and there, got into a car accident at a time that I let my insurance lapse on a leased vehicle,
Mm.
and had the pleasure of spending a night in county jail in Mesa, Arizona. um, but and then I thought, oh wow, okay, I'm in a metropolitan area with poor public transportation, and there's no way for me to get to my work, and back and forth, and I was trying to go to college. My dream has always been to get my education, which wasn't a thing in my community when I was growing up. And I just thought, like, how can I make my dream of getting my education work? And the only answer was the military. So I joined the Navy
Ah.
and turned 22 in boot camp and spent 9.5 years in the military. And that was kind of the middle chapter. Yeah. And then um, got out, went straight into grad school, got my master's in research psychology, and taught statistics at the university, which is such a joy, was such a joy. And then from there joined corporate, and I was in corporate for about 10 years. um, I did a variety of different things, but mostly just people oriented project management, team building type of things. I finished my 10 years in corporate at a couple of Fortune 250s, coaching executives in process improvement and agile methodology, so a lot of tech stuff. um, and then I actually retired at 43 years old, partly because I saved my pennies, not because the military, I mean, you have to do 20 years to get a paycheck, a retirement.
Oh,
But just because I saved my pennies since I was young, but there was a big layoff, and I thought, if I take a leap of faith and invest in real estate, I might be able to swing this and not go back to work. And so it's worked out. I'm almost 49. I've been retired for 6 years.
I can't believe we've been on such a same path. It was driving me crazy. I got my first house on my when I turned 18. I had my father lent me some money. I was living on food stamps and welfare and eating out of the dumpsters. And my father loved to dumpster dive.
Mhm.
So, and he thought we could find great food out of the dumpsters. And I ended up I still have the house that he lent me the money to buy when I was 18. I've had it for 50 years. And I realized that you're the same age as my first daughter, so I could have been your mother.
Oh, 76. She was born in 76.
She was born 77.
Okay. Yeah.
So same very close.
It's really beautiful to find parallels.
Yes, it is. And and it also makes you feel like, oh, my story isn't that unusual. Here's another woman, Sunshine, telling a very similar kinds of story. There's a lot to be in common, and it's also something very comforting about it. I had one other question about childhood and before, because I know it had to do with my developments with paranormal and psychic things. Was I had a lot of childhood trauma, and the trauma definitely, and I'm grateful to all the trauma and all the things that ever happened, and they make me who I am today. But I also find that it was good for me to acknowledge and know what those traumas are, because I've interviewed many people, and I find more often than not the ones that have sought out more spirituality or have had psychic experiences have had to deal with some sorts of traumas in their early life. And I was wondering if you had any of those kind of experiences as well, but it sounded like you had a very nice family life. And just wondering if you had any traumas, because I do think traumas are also part of the thing that shapes us to be who we are and gives us the strength once we survive them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. It's a vulnerable question, truthfully, but a really important one. I guess the first thing I want to say is I don't know, Gail, if anybody gets out unscathed from childhood without trauma. I think
Mhm.
it's a universal human experience. I think some may be more aware of it than others, and some may identify with their trauma more than others. But the human life in as a whole, I mean, we're literally, we separate from our mother and we break away, and we're this tiny little vulnerable terrified thing. If one thing goes wrong, we cry. Right, we have these loud lungs to say, hey, I have needs. And our life fully depends on the attunement of at least one caretaker, and when they're not doing it right, we know uh it can be, just the human experience can be brutally terrifying and lonely. Even if you have attuned caretakers and you have
Yes.
support and you have love. I think it's just the human experience to feel separate and alone. uh,
Mhm.
and I actually, it's how I would I answer that question. For me, I I had a lot of trauma. We'll put it this way: the ACE childhood, adverse childhood experiences test, kind of like the gold standard for testing for childhood trauma experiences. Out of, what is the scale? Is it 100 points? I score it like 90 or something like that, 92. I'm
Oh,
in. I'm
probably
in.
be here with you.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, my past would put me into the upper 8%, I think, of the world's population for trauma.
Mhm.
But I don't, I've healed from
Yes.
so much, so much with the guidance of spirit. And as I healed, I became aware of the protective nature of our subconscious minds to keep us totally, if not totally oblivious to the events that were most terrifying, or what in shamanism they would say susto or great scares, right? Where that soul fractures off.
Yes.
Then we may, even if we understand that there was something that was scary or frightening, the subconscious mind keeps us from feeling all the emotions of it, right? That disassociation tendency is so powerful to keep us surviving. It's only when we kind of intentionally slow down and get back into our bodies, which I would say is kind of choosing to get on the healing path, uh, that we invite our bodies to teach us how to feel our emotions in a gentle and loving way, hopefully.
Mhm.
Because if you don't do it gently and you don't have the skills for and body awareness to go into your body and feel, the somatic awareness, to feel your emotions and with so much compassion and so much uh, just gentleness,
Mhm.
then just being on the healing journey itself can be, some people don't make it through that. They choose to start healing their trauma, but then it all comes up too fast, and then they don't feel safe in their bodies. And because they don't feel safe in their bodies, they will do binging or distracting behavior. And then because they're not aware of their psyches, the internal critic will judge them for that behavior, and then they'll feel worse. And then it can snowball from there. There's so many people who want to feel better but don't necessarily have access to the tools
Mhm.
to heal trauma gently. But it's what's interesting is the VA did, I think it was the VA, at least they published it on their website. I don't know if they actually did this research themselves, but on their website under military sexual trauma and PTSD, there are a couple studies that talk about how long it takes to heal from trauma. And I find their research powerful because I think most people believe that healing from trauma takes years and maybe decades. Maybe you'll never do it. It's so daunting. It, I mean, that may be true if you don't have resources and the support and the knowledge of how to to work with your body to feel these emotions in a safe place. But the studies show that if you have basically a safe space, whether that's group therapy, other people who can relate to your experience and are compassionate, or a therapist who can hold that, create that safe container, right? A judgment-free listening and kind of helping you turn toward your own knowledge of what to do to fix yourself.
Mhm.
Um, if you have one of those types of things, and you know how to use your body to feel your emotions gently, you can heal severe trauma in 6 weeks. That's the average amount of time to heal. And my definition of healing from trauma is I believe I feel healed or whole about a past event if I can talk with my best friend about it, sitting on my couch with a cup of tea and our fuzzy socks about the event without being overwhelmed by emotion. To me, that's as good as I need to say I'm healed.
I think, and this really goes right into one of my questions here in our list, which has to do with many people are talking about the amazing results. I've also had them on my podcast as guests in their inner work that psychedelic assisted therapies have helped tremendously. Microdosing, very popular. I've had a guest, and he's a new dear friend, Sean McNamara, who talks extensively about it, did testing with different people, psychological testing, psychic testing, while they microdosed, while they macrodosed, and he published all these different books about the results. And the one thing that I came away with most about the positive results was that people who had been given just one psychedelic therapy sessions have been able to get out of their depression issues. And that with the microdosing for whatever, it's not something they did for years and years or anything like this, but they were able to face and deal with their depression after doing this. And the other thing that uh, he was saying was that he had been a Buddhist for 20 years in a specific Buddhist community, living as a Buddhist and doing all the meditations and all the different things and the things that you're doing as a community. And after 20 years, he said he did not reach I'm not sure if it's the spiritual place or, but whatever it is, the level of awareness that he came to, that he had once he did his first once psychedelic awareness experience. He said in that one experience, he got to the place that he'd been meditating 20 years to try to get to. And so I wondered whether, were you involved in psychedelic therapy, or did any of this sort of thing happen, or can you speak on any of this particular thing of plant medicine, psychedelic therapy, and if you've experienced any of this?
You're just ripping up a whole you're taking off the hood of the whole car.
And I'm only a third away through my
Just 3 days.
questions, so
Yeah. How much time do
let
we
me
have?
rip away.
Let me go get my dinner. Yeah, there's so much interest in psychedelics because they're effective. You know,
Mhm.
they're effective. I have a lot of experience with psychedelics. Yeah, I would say a lot now. But I was a late bloomer. I mean, I didn't thank God for Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind, because for us heady cerebral types, that book was kind of a bridge for many to go from, academic, materialist, cerebral realities to make us kind of feel safe to start dabbling in psychedelics.
I'm
I
sorry, which
dabbled.
book was that? I didn't.
Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it became a bestseller like overnight for a good reason.
Mhm.
But yeah, my do you want more the experience of my relationship with plant medicine, or do you want more my philosophy
You
on?
experience. I like the experience.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so I kind of dipped my toe in, um, and like many times when you first try psychedelics, you have a very strong constitution. So basically, your concept for reality is so cemented that it's hard to have your first time doing it uh, shift anything for you. A lot of people report like, unless the dose is high enough or they have a guide who's helping them with the dose, they don't have any effect. And that was the case for me. So of course I do what most unwise, early 40 somethings who never dabbled with psychedelics do. And I went all the way to the other end and
Yeah.
started working with really, really high doses. And with psilocybin, I, dabbled in MDMA, bufo, LSD, but mostly mushrooms. And for me, it had always been uh, access to a space where I could do work in my relationships. The people that I love, my family, my friends that I might be wanting to work through something with, would come to me in my journeys and we would talk. And we didn't have there was no pretense or barriers, and we would resolve things. And looking back, I guess I never questioned if it was really happening on some level. Like, of course, I didn't think they were aware of it, but on some level, it felt like it was actually making real differences. And I was certainly learning and growing a lot in my heart. So the therapeutic use of psychedelics is really kind of my own orientation. I mean, I have no judgment against recreational use, and I think it's really important for everybody to find the relationship that works for them. And recreational use is super fun, when the trees start talking to you and the leaves are rainbow colors and your heart is wide open. It's amazing. I will say that everything completely took a different turn when I went down to Costa Rica and sat with ayahuasca. And most people who sat with this medicine will tell you that it changed their life profoundly.
Mhm.
And I'm no different. That was June of 2022, after a couple of years of working with other medicines. And that's when I started hearing a voice. That's when I started hearing the voice of spirit and started having all the mystical experiences happen. And I mean, profound wisdom coming through. At the time, I would never have called it spirit. I thought in ceremony that week in Costa Rica, which which I was working with a very reputable company, uh, which had like Gabor Mate and Dennis McKenna on the board of directors. So very well respected. And it was 20 people from around the world. And we were down in Costa Rica, but the two curanderos or shamans were Shipibo, which is, the most, I shouldn't say, it's probably the most well-known of the 160 indigenous communities in the Amazon right now working with ayahuasca. And
Mm-hmm.
the Shipibo are known for their ikaros, their magical songs, or I shouldn't say magical, it's probably not politically correct. They're sacred songs that they're
Mm-hmm.
taught by the spirit of medicine when they do their own kind of like Buddhist um, isolation in huts, only they're doing it down in huts in the Amazon. And they do these isolation retreats for weeks, months, or years. And they're fasting, and there's, it's very strict dieta is what they call it. So, but eventually, if they stick with it, they will receive these songs, these ikaros, and they're beautiful, and they're sang in Quechua, the kind of native language of the Amazon. And these songs, if I kind of take a step back and I think about shamanic practices and cultures in general, and I'm certainly not an expert um, in shamanism, but when you think about shamanic communities that have a history working with psychedelic plants, the peyote in North America, um, and mushrooms from around the world, right? Really, the shamans are doing something with when they're in the induced altered state with the medicine, and that thing is really where bringing the divine happens down to the earth. You're
Mm-hmm.
connecting spirit to earth, the masculine to the feminine, and spirit works through the shaman at that, and they can see it. They see different things in that state, right? They hear different things, and they're really altering the material world from the spiritual world, and they are hollow bones, right? They're kind of getting out of the way and letting spirit move through them to do the work. So if they're taught ethically, then they're taught that they're not doing the work.
Right.
They're humbled to kind of just step out of the way and let it happen, which is actually the truth. um, and it takes a lot of commitment to stay on a path like that. I mean, it's really a lifelong learning path, right? There's no ending to that kind of journey. But for me, sitting in that huge hut, which they call a maloca, down in Costa Rica in 2022, I went down there with really pure intentions. I wanted to work through kind of a multi-year fractured relationship with my mom. And it was really causing me a lot of suffering. It'd been causing me suffering for a long time. And that week, she came to me. Actually, I think it was the first night. No, it was the third night. She came to me and she was in her highest form. I mean, she was her highest self. And she was so close to me, Gail. I mean, I could see her so clearly, but more than visually seeing her, I could, like if you're home alone and you're not expecting your spouse for another hour, and then you feel like a differential and pressure in the air, but you haven't heard a door click or anything, and you just know someone's in the house. So you go look, that that electromagnetic field that people give off when they're around, I could feel that. She was so close to me. She was like right in my ear. And she when she showed up, I burst into tears because I said to her, I was angry. I said, Mom, I I have been inviting you into my ceremonies for years and you haven't come. Why are you here now? And she said, she calls me by my legal name, but some of my family calls me by Sunshine because my name has been Sunshine, nickname has been Sunshine since birth. But she said, Sarah, I came tonight to tell you something important. Do you want to hear it? And I was like, I was really feeling a lot of big emotions, and I was really overwhelmed, but I could tell the calmness in her voice was really pure. And I said, I said, yes. And she said, when you were a baby, when you and your father had such a strong bond, and I felt insecure about your relationship. I had never, the love between you two is a kind of love I'd never received myself,
Mm-hmm.
which is a really courageous thing to admit to someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time that this conversation was happening, I wasn't really aware of intergenerational trauma. And I think it's actually very common for mothers to be jealous of their daughters and fathers to be jealous of their sons, and cross as well. But when we don't get our needs met as a child, and we're told that there's a scarcity of love, then it's only natural that we would still be looking for that love as an adult, right? But as she explained this to me, she said it in such a pure and honest way, like I could see her side and have compassion for her. But it also healed something in me, because I had always felt like she had competed with me, and probably unintentionally and unaware of it, but always known that she competed with me. And that as a child, that was so hurtful, because I didn't want to compete with her. I wanted just her love, right? And then she went on and she said, and as you grew, I watched you encounter these horrible experiences. I went through multiple uh, attacks and assaults in the military. And she said, I would watch you forgive people. And I didn't know how you did that. And she said, your heart and your ability to forgive is so big. And I've always wondered, like, how did this person come from me? And she said, do you believe, no, oh, the last thing she said about that was, asking me to repair right now is like asking a man with no legs to walk beside you.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it. She said, something else that I won't share, just to protect her privacy, even though this conversation wasn't with her material form. I want to respect her privacy, but she said something else to kind of bring that point home. And that it told me, like, this isn't about me. This isn't as much as it's hurting. It's not about me. And then she said, do you believe in soul contracts? And at the time I did. I was learning about them. And I said, yes. And she said, she showed me and her writing our contract, like up in the great sky. And she said, before we came into this life, you chose me and I chose you. And we agreed to do this life together. So beautiful. And she said, I want to tell you something and I want you to listen. You go do what you were meant to do in this life. Don't let me stop you.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And that was my like first 30 minutes that week, or something like that. I mean, it was just like, I mean, it was just over and over experiences like that. I was just gifted and gifted and gifted and gifted and gifted and gifted and gifted. And back then, um, in the between these healings, spirit is talking to me. First, as an unembodied presence that's speaking such compassion and wisdom, and other times through the shamans as they're doing their work. They're sitting in front of each person in this maloka and going around this circle, so dedicated to their work. Ceremony starts at like 7:30 at night, goes till 3 in the morning. They're singing songs pretty much nonstop for like 6 hours. These people are so hardworking. And as they're doing their work, the shamans and I are having telepathic conversations. And it was so natural to speak through my mind. Like I'm speaking to you.
Mhm.
And so, but then my analytical mind would be like, what the hell is happening? And I asked them through my mind one time, uh, I said to the female curandero, her name's Maestra Olga, beautiful woman, super strong songs, powerful, powerful healer. As she's singing this super powerful feminine song to me, I said to her with my mind, Olga, no, I said, Maestra Olga, you know I'm from the West and I have like an analytical mind. This is tripping me out. How are we, I'm not going to even believe this is real. That was the crack in the door that week. Like I started to have an ontological shock, because all
Mhm.
these mystical experiences. The day before I was an atheist and now I'm having telepathic conversations with shamans. And I said, I'm not going to believe this really happened. Can you show me tomorrow by smiling at me when we're in this big circle that you're hearing me right now? And if she did, and she sent me a powerful, beamed this beautiful big smile across the room. It knocked me over. It literally knocked me over. And then she shut down again.
Ah.
uh, there were a couple of experiences where I verified like this isn't just. So it's interesting the way spirit works because spirit both was speaking to me. Like the very first thing I heard spirit say was, I had actually fallen asleep during the ceremony. I had asked permission to fall asleep. I was sick, I had jet lag, I was not going to make it through 6 hours. I knew I needed to go to sleep. I asked permission to go to sleep, and that was granted. So I fell asleep. I went in the deepest sleep, where you don't exist. And coming up out of it, I heard, and it was spelled in words outside of my head, bring people together. It was like a period almost behind each word. And I remember thinking, that really happened. That I heard that outside of my head, and there was no person there. Those were the first words Spirit spoke to me. Um, but it's interesting because the universe is so mysterious and big, right? It's like when people ask me my view on things, I'm like, yes, that's true, and also that's true, and that's true, and also that's true. But how can it all be true? Because the universe is so mysterious. But there's when I think back on that week, I mean, now that I've kind of worked through a lot of the ontological shock and I'm kind of grounded firmly at the veil. I live in both worlds now, right? Um, Spirit was both, I was having my first auditory connection with the divine, but I was also seeing it work through the shamans, seeing spirit work through the shamans, and then I could start see it in, people speaking. And I started, the typical, like when you're waking up and you start to realize everything's awake, right? So um,
So, am I understanding then it's been just in the last, you've had these things throughout your life that, but you weren't really paying attention.
that's
And
right.
then later in life, you then started to realize, wait a minute, I need to go on this particular path. And so now for the last few years, you've been communicating with spirit voice,
I would say spirit's been communicating with me.
communicating with you.
I wasn't looking for any. I didn't
Right,
even know
right.
spirit existed. I was an
And
atheist. I go to Costa Rica in June of 2022, not even 3 years ago. I sit with this medicine, and I'm basically that week gifted the gift of mediumship. I don't know how to use it. I don't know that I'm a medium. I haven't been taught like I just know I connect. I mean, I'm connecting to a disembodied voice. And I spent the next 2 years through going through a shamanic illness, being taught in what I call the feminine, compassion, and
okay.
also in the masculine. very harsh. It's like life. Like life doesn't just show us through kindness. It also shows us through suffering, right?
Well, that's where I've learned my most important things. My biggest growth is through that. I wish I could say, oh yeah, the happy things are the ones that gave me all the growth, but it isn't. I love the happy things and I love the joy and I love spreading joy and happiness. But when
Mm.
it comes to the things that have happened that are traumatic or challenging or difficult, or as you're saying, a year of being shamanically, your body being sick and you're learning through the sickness through your body. I think that they call it the wounded healer. The shaman is the wounded healer. And I have to say that I did a little test about that with the psychedelics because,
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to know what uh, my experience, I was at Woodstock at 14 in the front center, a few rows back from the center of the stage, right there in the front. And I hadn't done a psychedelic yet. But when I was 15, I did my first psychedelics. And back in New York, then you were given LSD, mescaline. Nobody was doing MDMA or any of that. This is 1968, 69, 70. Uh, but there was no instruction. There was no guides. There was nothing except for New York kids all hanging out, being passed these drugs or buying them or getting them for free. And then the experiences happening from them that nobody knew. Oh yeah, that was a bummer trip, or that was a this, or that was nobody knew about setting or music or any of this kind of a thing. So we're doing it just off the fly. And I found that I was different then than my other teenage friends because I would immediately start talking to dead people and they would be talking about the rock music. And so we were in complete, and they thought I was like crazy or something, or I'd be deeply emotionally crying. But inside it was that I was seeing unbelievable things and it was moving me. But on the outside, it looked like I was having a meltdown. But on the inside, that's far from what I was experiencing. But these were young other teenagers and nobody knew, like, oh, what's wrong with Gail? Or why is she acting like this kind of thing. And so then at 17, I moved out to California when I was 15 and a half. But then by the time I was 17, I tried LSD in San Francisco in Golden Gate Park with a whole bunch of hippie people. And I had never done LSD before. I'd only done the mescaline. And I had to do a very small amount because my sensitivities were so strong that if another person took a hit of that LSD, and that LSD in those days is not the LSD that people are doing now. The LSD then was so much stronger. It's four, five, 10 times about what they're giving now. So I never wanted to ever trip again. It was like I felt like the last one, I was communicating to so many different dead people and I was crying my heart out and nobody was understanding anything. And they thought, should we take her somewhere?
Mm.
So I never did it again. Then I was given some mescaline. I think I was somewhere in my 30s, so about 30 years ago, maybe. I'm going to be 70 this year, so maybe 40 years ago, somewhere in that time. And my husband and I decided we would take this mescaline because it was from a chemist. We knew we were getting a pure product. It wasn't something off the street. And we went out into my orchard and we took this capsule each and had this amazing time. And I experienced something that you're talking about when you said you'd never seen that kind of love. And again, I'm with the dead people. So who comes into my space? I don't ask for it, they just jump in. So my father-in-law, who I'd never met, as he had died when my husband was in college, he appeared in my bedroom while we were laughing and carrying on. And there he was. And he was the love that this man had for his son. I had never seen love like that from a parent. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, I've never experienced that. And I'm telling my husband what his father is like. and I'm saying, oh my God, he's got the biggest heart of anyone I've ever seen. He's so affectionate and warm and physical and loving, and I never had that. So I'm looking at this, and I'm, but meanwhile the man is dead. I'm looking at the spirit of all this telling me this, telling the husband. And when we finished, the next day I said, oh my God, I had not taken this type of a psychedelic thing in all these years, even when I've been at the peyote ceremony with the Huichols, who are the original holders of the peyote. I just took a little bit of each because I'm there by myself. I don't speak the language. I don't want to go way out there someplace. I don't know. So I saw that all the things I had been doing since I had taken that last trip when I was a teenager till now were all accessible without any psychedelic drug. And that was for just that alone, I was grateful to take that one trip, to
Mm.
see that all these things that had been happening to me through the years were real and powerful, but they could be with a drug or without a drug. With the
Yeah.
drug, it's the same thing. It's not that it doesn't discount it, but that we don't actually need to do that. They're accessible. So it was a great teaching just to
Mm.
see that, and also to experience, like you were saying, a love that I've never felt before, to see how someone else experienced that. And I thought these were great teachings about that one time in 40 years that, after being a New York person that hung out in the streets with all the kids, then that's what everybody was doing back then. So I'm I want to get on to just a couple other questions and just kind of move down to another topic here, if that's good with you.
Sure.
Um, I was wondering if you wanted to tell us about the mission of your work, that it's not just to channel, but to help others awaken spiritually. And how do you do this with them? And if there's any site or thing you want to say, that if anyone wants to contact you or be interested in any of these things, I'll of course have a description at the end, but anything you want to share about that.
Oh, okay, let me make sure I got this clear. So my work other than channeling, how
Well,
I
because I noted that you were saying how you do channeling and you are a medium, but that's not your big focus. It has more to do with helping others awaken spiritually.
oh yeah, I'm glad I wrote that. Thanks
Well,
for
I
keeping
read
me on
it
track,
there.
Gail. Thanks for reminding me what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Yes, okay, yeah. You're awakening the people spiritually, and and we're wondering how you do this. If you do courses, or you meet them one-on-one, or you just have a transformation in between the two of you, or what exactly
Um,
happens.
Such a great question. It's multifaceted. Well, I'm going to start by saying I know the word channel is so convenient because it kind of has a universal meaning and shared meaning. But I try to give a caveat when I'm using that word because I wouldn't choose that word if it didn't have a shared understanding for others. Um, and I'm sure not the only medium who feels this way, but when I'm speaking with spirit, it literally feels like this conversation. I mean, it just feels like a conversation with a friend. You know, spirit knows all of my thoughts, never judges me, is the most always has the most compassionate lens of everything.
Mhm.
Um, my relationship with spirit is what has made me, this is not for everybody, but my own beliefs, believe that there is no hell. Because there's learning, there are impacts for our choices and consequences for our decisions. But I think it's learning. I think that's what it's about. Um, and it doesn't channeling also has, for me, it feels pretentious a little bit. Maybe it's just me being uncomfortable with that word, and it's my thing.
I understand.
Okay, good. But when I'm so there are three ways that spirit and I connect. Two of them Spirit is pushing up to down, spirit to me. And those two ways are my teaching dreams, which have happened on average every week for 3 years now.
Wow.
Those dreams are usually in the feminine compassion energy, not always, sometimes in the masculine, but they're typically showing me where I'm divided in my heart or where I'm judging. I have always asked for that. Please show me where my heart is divided. So those teaching dreams, often, not always, if I'm really wanting to understand someone and their behavior is maybe hurtful to me or someone else, I will pray before I go to bed, Spirit, can you please show me this person's heart? And I will get a dream of being basically in that person's heart and understand what's driving their behavior. And it's always shown through the most compassionate lens.
Mm-hmm.
So the teaching dreams have been, just it's just divine grace. I mean, to have weekly, sometimes they come like 3 dreams a night. It's a lot. And I've written everyone down. Everyone that I remember, I've written down for 3 years. And sometimes I'll go a couple days without one. And when that happens, I'm like, oh, thanks for a break. It's so nice. I can be a normal human the next day. But those dreams have significantly increased my learning curve and made my learning curve very steep, right? Because I'm learning not just while I'm awake, I'm actually learning while I'm asleep. And often I will wake up speaking the words I need to hear and remember and write down. So they will just kind of come up out of me. So the teaching dreams are from spirit down. Then I get messages when I'm meditating, and my meditation practice for the last about 2 years has been an hour a day. And when I'm meditating about 50% of the time, I will get at least one message. I'll just share a quick message. One of my most recent favorites.
Is it the phone one you were telling us about earlier?
No,
Oh,
I probably have at least 1,000 messages at this point, but it came in that really quiet space where there is stillness, but there's also awareness, but there's no sense really of self. Kind of, you lose your body, you lose, there are really no thoughts, just kind of this baby's breath of awareness. And it was in that space. Spirit communicates through emojis sometimes because I'm a big emoji person.
me too.
Are you? It's great. They're so fun. The image was the mountain emoji with a male mountaineer climbing the mountain. And at this point in my meditation practice, I had been starting to work with detaching from my thoughts. So just watching my thoughts, which is kind of a masculine process. It's a heady process, unlike maybe in the feminine where you hear your thoughts and you're compassionate towards them, right? And so I see the emoji, and with it came what was so creative. It's so amazing that I'm so in awe of this intelligence because it's infinitely intelligent. And one time I'd asked Spirit, how many languages do you speak? And after some time, because there was like a humility, the answer was every language that ever was and every language that ever will be. Whew. So with this emoji, I get a modern take on a Japanese haiku. Japanese haikus are 557. This was a 335. And in Japanese haiku art, which they consider an art poetry, the breath at the end of each line is considered a character. That pause is there to allow space so that the words can settle before you go to the next line. And the haiku was, I slowed down and readied and climbed just as high.
Mm, lovely.
So that's a poetic example of a message I'll get in meditation. That,
Beautiful.
yeah, that particular message was a pointer to me. I mean, I didn't know what spirit was talking about because well, they're breadcrumbs. And then in the days and weeks that follow, it's like unwrapping a present. You figure out what it really means, right? I realized what spirit was saying is I needed to slow down, drop into the heart to create a new orientation to my thoughts from the heart level, more compassionate. Essentially, the inner critic voice that says things that make us causes suffering in the body, I was resisting that voice. When it would speak, I would, when you feel pain, you pull away. And so I would push against that energy and that would cause suffering. It's a battle in the mind, right? It's between the mind and the body. And it's in the mind, but it's affecting the body. And what that was showing me, what ended up happening is I went and spent some time, a week or so, really working with that inner critic's voice and getting curious about it from a very open-hearted place and realizing with a lot of focus and some work and following my intuition and the tool internal family systems with Richard Schwartz's modality IFS, which started as a psychotherapy tool, but now has kind of become much more than that, more like a framework for the way we relate to our psyches. But this digging resulted in me coming to realize that so much of the inner critic's voice my whole life, which we don't have as tiny children, it's the voice of our parents in society, right? That's internalized to keep us safe. And I was such a bright child. I mean, not just intelligent, but I have a lot of exuberance.
Mhm.
And I found myself in environments where if I was bright, it wasn't safe. And so the inner critic voice developed in me to stop me from being joyful because it wasn't safe. And so when I realized that that inner critic voice was there just because it was a terrified child, like, hey, don't get burned, don't get burned, don't get burned. The harsh tone of the inner critic, I had always interpreted as anger. But in the brain, anger and fear are closely wired. So when somebody is afraid, their voice often sounds angry.
Mhm.
And the inner critic is actually, for me, a scared little child, which many people have discovered. But I had been working with this modality since 2016 and never done that work with the inner critic. And when I did that, when I saw it and got curious, started asking it questions, and it showed me, hey, I've just been trying to keep you safe, lady. I started having so much compassion for it and like it's a practice, right? I mean, we default to our old and then we remember, wait, we have this tool, this new tool. But essentially what happened was that inner critic is the cause of so much of our suffering. And when it started to unburden and transform, then I started asking it to, hey, can you please speak to this other part over here who wants to be bright? you know, and this other part that maybe is a people pleaser, and this other part that wants to be neurotic. Can you all talk? Because if you guys can get along, that would be amazing. And it happened. And all of a sudden, I woke up one day, Gail, and the battle had quieted in my head.
Oh,
It was, and I just wrote a paper about this actually. And not only was, and it's still that way. I mean, of course, there's again, it's not a linear process. It's 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. But with the extra energy I had been using, I mean, my energetic body had been using to push up against that, resist the inner critic's voice. I that energy gave way. I don't have to use my energy that way anymore. So now I have this extra energy. And what's been happening is I've been having all these like kitchen dance parties, making new dance moves in my kitchen, showing spirit them, I tease all the time. I'm so joyful. I will literally just find myself dancing. I mean, I'm dancing all day long. And I
that's
said to spirit, giggling the other day, I said, my personality is changing. But that is a Western frame on happiness. We think of emotions as states, especially happiness. We think of it as, or excuse me, like a trait. And no, as a state that comes and goes. But in the East, they know happiness is our inner being. That's what we are. And trauma covers it up. So when we heal through those layers of trauma, that light is just shining through. And so Spirit said, because I said my personality is changing, and Spirit said your true personality is shining through.
Mhm.
So I know that's a windy journey, but it kind of, it's a good example of how becoming a medium, because for me, Gail, I'm not just, I'm wanting to heal all my trauma and awaken. I mean, maybe that's a lofty goal, but I'm setting my GPS for enlightenment. And I know it's a controversial word. I agree. It's a trigger word for a lot of people, as me as well.
Yes.
Spirit uses that word, but enlightenment is essentially an abiding unity experience where you are literally identified with everything, and you see, and I only know this because I've had non-abiding experiences of this and gifts in my dreams from Spirit that show me how it actually feels in the body. But when someone is awakened, as Spirit said, you you will know when you are enlightened, when you, me, and everything else merge into one. That is not a metaphor. It's literal. So you still have agency over your body, but you're not identified with this. You are identified with all. And that is, I could go on about that forever, because all the wisdom traditions and religions talk about this in their own language. They're all pointing to a truth, which is unity, you know. So that's where I'm setting it, because why not?
Yeah, that's the we are one.
Yeah,
When I was at Woodstock, a guy got up and across the wooden fence, he painted "We are one."
mm,
And I felt when we saw that was an actual caption of what went on with 400,000 kids in a completely difficult situation. And everything was a loving experience there. I mean, the energy of what you felt, I've never felt anything like that those days there in any other group situation, like what happened in that moment. It was a very magical merging of people. But I
mm,
want to say two things that you might want to write down, or if not, I can always email it to you.
okay,
But I'm not sure if you're familiar with a very dear friend of mine who's been on our show. He's 92 now. His name is Dr. Stanley Krippner,
okay,
and he started the first dream investigating laboratory thing, or he was part of it. I don't think he started it in the 50s in Brooklyn at Maimonides. Hospital there, and he has written many, many books on dreams. He's considered the man, and he's traveled all over dreaming with the people in different. He's so well known that when he goes down to the Amazon, the natives will say, Stanley's coming. I mean, that's how well he is loved and known throughout the world. And he is the most humblest person. So he's not like some well-off, it's not like that kind of a thing. He's a really amazing human being. And what you're doing with your dreams, I think it would be good just for you to maybe check out something of the books that he has. And the other thing that came to me was when you talked about going to Costa Rica, and then you talk about the Cairo in Peru.
Ikaros.
Yes. Um, my dear friend who happened to have been my son, who's now 35, she was his preschool teacher. And I hadn't connected with her for many years. And then she called and we found each other again. So it's only in these last 10 or 15 years that we got back together. And she had this dream of she's always felt she was supposed to go to Peru. She doesn't speak a word of Spanish, and she came to our house to visit with a man whose music you would love, named Tito La Rosa, and he's one of the most well-known sound musicians in all of Peru, and he is also the person they bring when they discover instruments in different places that, like it's a museum piece, or it's been they've uncovered it somewhere. They bring it to him, and he's able to play these instruments. And he went around doing like ceremonies and flower ceremonies when he would come to the United States. And so this was how we got to know him. So she came here for a flower ceremony. They met each other. She told him how I've always had this fantasy about Peru. He said, well, if you come there to visit, I will help you out. So she went down to Cusco. Here's this single woman alone. I think she was maybe 70 or almost 70 at the time. And she ended up getting together with an anthropologist, I think, and a archaeologist, or they did all this deep work into the history of the Peruvian people, and then went up into the mountains until they found a sacred place. And they found a sacred place up from oh God, my memory. I can't remember the name of the city the second, but it's up in the mountains, high up at about 10,000 feet elevation or something, high elevation. And from scratch, she built the most beautiful center for sacred plant ceremonies and events like this.
I think I
Want
know.
to look
Be an
her up?
author?
It's called Ancestral Highlands,
Okay.
AH, and her name is Holly Lasky.
Okay.
And she now has a website. I think it's just called AH or Ancestral Highlands. So you can see what she did. She built the mirror pools that were done in the times of the ancient, where they would do all the, that was how they would do their not telepathy, but the predictions and the things and the readings were all done by
Divination.
looking into the divinations, was all done in these mirrored pools that are meant to deal with the place between where the stars and the moon, whatever. She did all this. She had the homes that she built there. They're sort of like dome shapes, and they're all built in the style of what original Peruvian homes were built. So when you see how the logs are done, everything.
Oh,
And she now and originally she was just doing this small thing. Well, now she's built where you can have people stay there. They don't have to go to hotels. She has accommodations now. You can just go there for a vacation. She does not offer the plant ceremony medicines, but the people there she knows comes to do that with whoever. So they bring their own
so
thing. Yeah, they bring their own persons. And all she does is provide the place, the space, and she makes incredibly delicious food at 10,000 feet elevation.
is she working with the Caro people,
I believe so.
the highlands of Peru?
Yes,
Quero.
yes.
That's the tradition that's most common in that area. Yeah.
So check her out. So I just didn't want to end up before we got to the end of the show, and I forgot to tell you. So I'm writing the little notes here. Don't forget to tell her about Stanley Krippner and
Got
Ancestral
it.
Highlands, because I think that both of them would be great ones for you to check out.
Thank you, Gail.
So
Yeah, can I go back for a moment
yes,
and
please,
kind of
because I'm getting
interweave?
pretty good here. I'm almost done. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm fine if you are. And
I am. I'm
if
just
the
letting us
listeners get
go.
bored, they can drop off because
Okay, that's
you and I
right. I'm
are.
enjoying this. Let's continue. We have time.
No,
We have
listeners,
plenty of
please, we
time.
want you to stay. I think you'll know when we feel complete. But um, you were asking about my work, and uh, that was a long story, but it kind of weaves in that my so that first week in Costa Rica, I had never been well, I didn't, of course, been exposed to the idea of enlightenment, Satori, Nirvana, whatever you want to call it. But like most Westerners, I had never conceptualized that that was attainable in my life. And and again, there's a lot of triggering energy around this word and this idea, and I think I'm pretty well versed in it this by this point, but I want to use and honor the word enlightenment because that's what spirit uses. Every once in a while, spirit will use the word awakening, but to me, we have these, tiny, shifts that culminate in big shifts, like the one I described, waking up and I've been having so much joy dancing all the time. Literally, the whole point of this work is to be in the present moment. And as we heal through these layers of trauma, We don't have to use our energy to keep all these things down. As they dissolve, we can be right here, right? Attuned in our body, hopefully with open hearts, speaking our truth. And all these wisdom traditions show you the lineages how to do this ethically and progressively, because when we awaken, it can be a huge ontological shock. Spirit says if we awaken too fast, it can be dangerous, both dangerous for self and others, right? And there are many ego traps along the way where the ego can sequester our experience and make us feel like our self-importance is inflated because we know something that somebody else doesn't know or had some experience, which is all part of the experience. Hopefully we're all here learning. But I had never really thought that that was possible. And that first week, Spirit told me, this is possible.
Mhm.
Like, you can set this as a goal. One time, Spirit showed me a timeline in my mind, and I was 0 here and 90. I think it was technically 92 here. I'm not attached to that. I don't know if it's a metaphor. I don't know when I'm going to die. But Spirit said, do you see this is your life? And then marked the timeline at 46, which is the day I turned 46 in Costa Rica. And Spirit said, do you see from 0 to 46, you had a lot of suffering. And I felt so heartbroken just thinking about all the suffering. I'd been through all the trauma, right? And I said, it's almost too much to think about, Spirit. And Spirit said, and from 46 to the end of your life, you will become more and more at home. And the word home is a metaphor for, whatever, I won't use the word enlightenment, waking up, because we all go home, right? And for Spirit, that means becoming more in our hearts, right? Out of the head and into the heart. And then I said to Spirit, you've never been so candid, because I'm in the middle of this shamanic illness and I'm going through all these tests, but I'm also being taught with teachings like this, a conversation. And I said, you've never been so candid. And Spirit said, you do realize that's what you're working towards, right? Now, I believe, whether we know it or not, we're all working towards that, because it's our true nature to discover our true nature, that underneath the conscious mind, underneath the body, the conscious mind, and the unconscious mind, we have this source of light inside of us. And I think that the universe has laws and rules, or maybe that sounds too strict. It has a language it speaks. And most wisdom traditions would say, do unto others as we would have done to ourselves. But there's some nuances to the language that life speaks. I mean, it speaks the language of love, but love for self, love and respect for self and others, right? And the planet. And when we aren't attuned to that language, we are suffering. As Spirit says, we choose all the way up and all the way down. Spirit's a big proponent of the idea of free will. So even though I guess to answer your question, my work is I think of it as kind of three things. The first is my advocacy work for voice hearers. I'm hoping to either attend, or if I'm lucky and meant to be, present in October in Czech Republic in Prague in October at the Intervoice Hearing Voices International Conference. It's an annual conference. They promote the destigmatization of voice hearers around the world, and I believe work at the policy level. So if I'm lucky, I would love to get into that, kind of speaking kind of bridging the world between academic researchers, because I speak that language with my academic background in research psychology, and people who maybe don't have the resources or support or have been even marginalized in communities, to try to bridge that understanding and speak at conferences on that's my advocacy work. Then I have mediumship and my channeling, and I I not only want to share these teachings with others. Like, what a joy to be interviewed and be able to pass on the literal verbatim teachings from the unified field. Like, I pinch myself, like, I get to do this for a living. I'm not even a living, I'm not making money off it, but I get to do this. This incredible, right? Mediumship is the biggest joy of my life. Um, and then separate from that, but affecting those two, is my own healing and awakening journey. It's a very powerful story to go from an atheist to a voice hearer overnight, and to
Yes.
have that voice guiding you on how to heal trauma gently and how to awaken gently. I mean, so my own life these last 3 years has become very rich material for and examples filled with tools, practical tools, tangible tools for how to love ourselves, take care of our bodies, and also be in loving relationship while still speaking our truth. That
Mhm.
those tools are probably the most valuable part of, because as a medium, when somebody has the gift of mediumship, they are doing service work, whether they're taking money or not for it. You know, I trust everybody to follow their own ethics and heart on that. But they're doing service work, and they're also healing and awakening through their relationship with whatever they're channeling to. Because if they're a real medium, they're channeling with divine love, right? So, as Spirit said, you both want to awaken and help others. This doesn't make you special. It just means you're pulling double duty. Like, you're doing extra work. But the work I'm doing in my life to heal and awaken is the fodder for the stories. Like, I have all the tools to go research and quote all the right studies, but I'm
And a
finding.
master's degree, right?
I'm sorry.
And you also have a degree in that research
I,
psych,
I do, and I
right?
love research, and I love researchers, and I love academia, and I speak that language, and thank God for studies and science. But I'm finding that as I'm talking at more conferences, that I kind of don't need to quote any studies. I can go find the studies that support my experience, but my experiences is my own learning, my own life. Life is our greatest teacher.
Yes. I I I wanted to show something to the audience because we're talking about listening to, you call it spirit. I like that choice for that word, for what that is. I call it my inner voice or my higher self. And as you know, I went through some crazy flu that was going around here or whatever, and had been really sick for quite a few weeks. And I'd been in the house and I was going through my own whatever things that happen during sickness that you learn about yourself. And I said to myself, I have to go out now. I'm feeling stronger. I'd better take a walk around my orchard. And I guess the important thing I want to mention here is that we're talking about 15 acres of land. We're not talking, I went to my backyard. So 15 acres is a pretty big area to walk around in. And as I'm walking around and I'm feeling the touch to nature again in the sun, and I was missing all of that being under covers in a bed. And I heard the voice. And I have become now where, and this is the thing I'm hoping our audience grasps on, is that the more that you listen to that inner voice or spirit, the stronger it comes and the more frequently it comes. And so I was all alone. I'm walking around the orchard. I'm weak, I don't have a lot of strength. And I say, "Oh, I better lay down by this piece of wood on the pond because I can't make it all the way around the orchard. I'll rest and then I'll make it back to the house." And the voice said, "But there's a gift for you waiting out here. There's a gift, there's something waiting for you." So I lay down and I open up my eyes and I see this shape in the ground like a hook, it's half partly over. And all of a sudden, I always think, because like you, I don't want anyone to be hurt. I don't, so I'm always trying to do things ahead. If I think that somebody could fall or something could happen, I'm always thinking ahead of time that no one should ever get hurt. So I say, "Oh, that looks like a metal hook. You better go pick that up so nobody trips on that if anybody comes out down to this area of the property." So I say, "When I finish sunbathing, I'll pick it up." So I go to get it, and when I go to pick it up, it turns out this little kind of shape on the bottom that was coming up from the ground was really this full deer head.
Wow.
And it's a 4 point, which my friend Julio, who's here, who's a Huichol, said that it's a young deer.
Mhm.
You can see that it has the teeth, the
Wow.
eyes, I mean everything.
Amazing.
Well, it's not just that I listened to my voice, it's that I had yelled at the universe. I was pissed at it couple of weeks earlier, and I said, "How come everybody finds these things, but I don't find a deer head? I need to find a deer head for part of my shamanic things, and I need a deer head, but I don't know, I live in here and like a deer everywhere. How come I only find a little piece of bone or a little piece of teeth or a little part of an antler, but I've never gotten a full complete unit?"
Love it. I love
And
your happiness.
and sure enough, the universe gave this to me. And
And wanted you to know that it was a gift because it would tell you that it was listening to you.
yes. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to share this in the present because this only happened, and because we had to change our meeting till later because I'd been so sick,
Mm.
that to me, that to share that story, that says it all to me about honoring the inner voice, the spirit voice, the listening. And I could have just said, "Oh, what are you, crazy? What do you mean there's something out here? It's 15 acres. Where am I supposed to go find this thing? You know what I mean? What is it? This thing?" But I didn't. I just let it out into the okay. And I accepted it, and it rewarded, and it all validated, and it did all this wonderful stuff. So I'm just sharing that to say it's not a joke. It's truly, really how it works. Listen, and the voice gets stronger.
Yeah.
And it's there to protect and help you. Like you're saying, it's not there to harm you in any way.
Well, it's interesting because before humans spoke language as we know it with words, right? That's because we're speaking thoughts, but our thoughts are language in our heads, right? Before we had language, the universe communicated to us through imagery.
Mhm.
So pre voice, we had imagery. And that's, this universe will communicate to you in whatever way it knows you can receive it, right? And it's always communicating to us. But I, what I also think, well, two things. It also shows how loving like, Gail, do you ever just sit back and think like, wait a minute, do you ever just trip balls being a medium? Like,
I couldn't even acknowledge that I was until recently when somebody told me that they felt so healed by the connection I made with him and the son that he just lost recently, unexpectedly. And he had been in a depression and sad for 2 years. And when we finished our Let's Connect to Your Son experience, I never know what to call it because I feel like when you say, "Oh, I'm a healer," I don't know, just all those things feel like too much for me. And I don't, "Oh, I'm a shaman." I don't know. It just feels like too much. But
talking to, yeah.
I just step out of the way and I'm not Gail or the shaman or the anything. And we make this powerful connection that leaves him. I just received an email again recently saying how for months now he's been in nothing but joy and connection with his son ever since we did this healing together, or whatever the word is. And I'm like, I said, I guess I am a medium. That was the only thing I could say to myself.
Gail, when was that? When was that?
What's that?
When was that?
That was that we did that session was 3 months ago. I don't know, something like that.
That's when you really identified as a medium?
That's when I really said I should say that word.
So you've been having this podcast and you're going into your fourth year as a
Yes,
medium at large, but you didn't really like let that word fully in till 3 months ago?
exactly.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that you know that now. And when I was in the discovery phase of trying to figure out what this voice was, because it never felt like me.
Hmm.
It never felt like me. It was always outside of me teaching me, right? Um, at first it presented as the male shaman in Costa Rica. And that's actually not uncommon in shamanic cultures. A shamanic initiation, you often believe that you're being taught by your teacher, your human teacher, which
Hmm.
is a good thing because psychologically it would have probably broke me to go from an atheist to talking to God, right? As Joan of Arc says, if you talk to God, it's fine, but if God talks back, you're crazy, right? So I mean, it would have been too much. So I thought it was this shaman. It presented as the shaman for a long time, which is part of why my family really struggled with me and my experiences. But then it morphed after getting some guidance from people I trusted who were connected to ayahuasca and understood the way it worked. Then it morphed into, for a short period, into the spirit of the plant. And in my dreams, basically, it said, I'm now connecting you directly to the spirit of the plant of ayahuasca. So I still thought in dual terms, like I'm separate from you, and the
Hmm.
plant has a spirit, and that's what's teaching me. It's a grandmother, grandfather, whatever you want to call it. But it didn't really fit my paradigm of how I understood reality because I learned enough about different religions and philosophies, and Buddhism always kind of felt the most resonant to me. And Buddhism, basically, depending on the Mahayana, Theravada, and some believe in souls, some don't. The soul being the animated part of our humanness, the part that breathes life into us, what they might call it life force or chi or whatever you want to call it. But basically, the idea that the unity idea that everything is one, in shamanic cultures, they would say it's a web, or our ancestors. These are kind of code words for interconnectedness, right? But I'd studied so much physics in my life, and everything from quantum mechanics to astrophysics, and knew that space-time breaks down. It bends, it goes into black holes and gets spit out. So I knew, I'm like, what? So I kept asking, like, and I kept getting answers that were matching my level of awareness and what I could handle at the time. And it slowly edged me. Like one time I said, uh, what am I speaking to? And then I went to bed, and in my dreams that night, I heard, conscience is not here. Conscience is not there. Conscience is everywhere, which fit into my idea of unity, right? And another time, a friend asked me, "Are you sure you're not talking to like a delegate, like an archangel? You think you're really talking to God, Sunshine?" I'm like, I know, it's crazy. Don't say that too loud. Now, I've worked through a lot of the hangups with that, but because I think a lot of people call it different things and it's all the same thing. But I said, and it speaks in our body, in our gut, and in our mind. It's in the body as well. It's not just, a voice. But I went to bed that night and I said, look, I'm going to kind of be heartbroken if I find out you're an archangel. Because there's a part of me that really likes the idea of knowing that I'm connected to source,
Hmm.
you know, but I know you're infinitely intelligent and you're infinitely compassionate and loving. And I really want to know the truth. If I'm speaking to a delegate, then let me know that. I'll be disappointed, but I'll work through it. And I went to sleep that night. And when in my dreams, I heard, spirit is in everything.
Mhm.
And then I had a couple other experiences on plant medicine that helped me understand, kind of gently pointing me in this direction of consciousness is the underlying fabric of reality, not space-time. That is how mediums connect, because everything is connected. That's how we can talk to dead people, right? And so I thought, oh God, this is a bold move. Like, do I really say my truth here? Or do I really say I'm speaking to God? You know, what they would say in Hinduism is Brahman, right? That is ripe for like attacks on narcissism. Like, I'm it's not really a safe culture in the West that embraces philosophical materialism to say you speak to the divine. But the more I started learning, like one of my favorite spiritual teachers is Adyashanti. He's a Zen contemporary teacher out of California, also non-secular, and so humble. He just retired after 27 years. I think he's still doing a little bit. He just started doing a little bit work again, but semi-retired. Anyway, he talks a lot about the still small voice. And that term, still small voice, he got, I believe, from Christianity. And I know the Abrahamic religions talk about the still small voice, and you'll hear it in prayer if you sit in prayer for long enough. So if you sit quiet for long enough, and prayer basically morphs into meditation, not the prayer that sends energy out, but the prayer that is open and receiving, like a feminine energy, you'll hear the still small voice. So I actually think, so I think of this, I mean, I call it spirit because, uh, but it's from a physics perspective, it's the unified field of consciousness.
Mhm.
It is, it's, you know, the universe created itself. I mean, at one time I asked spirit, like I've asked so many questions. So tell me again what happened before the Big Bang? Like, can you, I mean, I'm like,
I,
and one time spirit said, showed me the eye of Horus, the Egyptian god, and it was closed and it just opened.
oh,
And I was like, what? No, let me rephrase my question because maybe you didn't understand. This is cocky, right? Talking to God, like maybe you didn't understand me. I was like, can you tell me what happened before the Big Bang? And there's Horus opens. And I was like, that's it? What does that mean? Like, I'm like, that's a metaphor. What does that mean? Of course, I'm like, oh, consciousness has always been there. And then Spirit said, do you see? Sorry, I'm laughing because I just got the pun because Spirit is so funny. I mean, this experience happened probably almost 2 years ago, Gail, and I'm just now getting the pun, but you'll get it here now that I'm giving you now that you're seeing my reaction. Spirit said, do you see that I dreamed up the universe, and the universe dreamed up the Milky Way galaxy, and the Milky Way galaxy dreamed up the Earth, and the Earth. That word dream is a shamanic pointer, right? Because there's a lot of talk about waking and dreaming states, right? And the Earth dreamed up you, and you dreamed up your organs, and your organs dreamed up your organelles, and your organelles dreamed up your cells, and your cells dreamed up your mitochondria. And I'll pause and say, I believe I'm going to get the number wrong, but my mitochondria contains like 98% of the DNA of all of the mitochondria in the rest of my body. So I'm a hologram, right? Just as you are, the intelligent reflections. Spirit said, and your mitochondria, oh, and your cells dreamed up your mitochondria, and it all has free will.
mhm.
I mean, these are the kind of things that moved me from being a materialist, thinking space-time is the fundamental nature of reality. It doesn't, the things that we know from physics and science don't fit into the materialistic framework.
Not only this, but it wasn't till I worked with scientists that not only did I learn that I had all these other abilities that I didn't know I had until they had me do these different experiments, but it was the experiments they had me do that showed me that time was not what I thought it was. I thought time was this thing, this linear sort of thing or whatever. And they have me do the first experiment they had me do when I started with them in 1998, and this was with Dean Radin and Russell Targ, was remote viewing. Well, I'd never heard of remote viewing or what remote viewing was or any of this. And they didn't give me any training. They just said, okay, Gail, make yourself comfortable. And we want you to start drawing. It's 1 o'clock now. And at 3 o'clock, we're going to select we aren't, but the computer is going to select with a random number generator, one photo out of 300 from National Geographic selections that we've put into the computer. We want you to draw the picture that they're going to show you at 3 o'clock. I looked at him and I said to myself, wait a minute, you're asking me to draw something that hasn't even been picked yet. How would I do that? That doesn't even make sense to me. But I sat down and sure enough, the pictures started coming and because for me, it's audio. Like these people who say I see a lot, I'm more of for me, it's voice and hearing
Yeah.
more than the visual, though I've had some visual things. And I start drawing, this thing with a stone and the creek, and I'm doing, and at 3 o'clock, the picture comes up, and I'm like, oh my God, I drew the things in the picture. How did I do that? So I did these, like 20 at a time. We would do 20 sessions, but not at one, we'd come back, we do we do two each time I'd come down to Palo Alto to do these with them. So we would do two in a day. We'd do one before lunch and then another one after lunch. And that's when I started to realize that if I'm seeing into the future and this hasn't even happened yet, how can time be the way we think of as time? It can't. So that was where I
The
learned
space, not
that.
just time, but space. Because you're
Then,
seeing something not within your physical environment, right?
right, it's not in my physical
Space and
environment.
time are not fundamental to reality. That's the thing, is that, the simplest way I understood this was before I identified as a medium. It was 14 months into my journey. I was still deep in hell with shamanic illness, but also being taught in loving ways. And I actually went into my second ayahuasca ceremony totally terrified out of my skin. I didn't want to do the medicine. I couldn't regulate my nervous system. I was completely almost in a psychotic break. It was horrible. But I ended up drinking the medicine the first night. And I was like, look, we got to talk. I have bones to pick with you. And uh, that is when Spirit said two things. Spirit said, this is going back to the beginning of our conversation and the word omnis. Spirit showed me a picture of the earth, and Spirit and I were like outside of it. Spirit never has a body, but it's a presence. And out of the earth grew a tree of life, the African folk symbol, which of course is the connection, the archetypical image for the trunk of the tree connecting the divine heavens, the things we can't see, the governing spirit, and the ancestors and the wisdom, right? The earth. And this tree of life grows out of the top and grows branches around the entire globe. And then whoosh, spirit zooms me down to the earth level. And all of a sudden, we're in a jungle, which I realized later was the Amazon. And we're standing, well, I'm standing under this huge overstory, this canopy of trees. And also it's dark, I can smell, the petrichor. It's just like really jungly. And all of a sudden this vine drops down from the canopy, and it hits the ground with a thud. And this vine, of course, ayahuasca is made from a vine. and the chicruna plant. And this vine is about an inch and a half in diameter, and it's solid thick. And spirit allows me to feel into, because in these teachings, spirit puts sensations in my body to teach me. And I can feel you can't get into it. There's a force field around it. So this vine thuds, and then all of a sudden another vine over here thuds, and then another one, thud, 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 thud. And spirit said, do you see, this is ayahuasca, and this is Catholicism, and this is Judaism, and this is Buddhism, and this is 5-MeO-DMT, and this is science, and they all lead to the truth. Yours just happens to be ayahuasca, but they're all sacred. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, it's not a surprise to me to hear about the other wisdom traditions being sacred, because I've always known that. I've just known it. I said, but the big question is, what's on the other side of this vine? What am I talking to right now? And spirit said, the divine.
That's the joke.
And I didn't even get it because I was still too fried at the time, just from the illness. But I said, wait. So the Hindus were right? Like, God is a unified field? And spirit said, yes. And I said, that's what I'm talking to? That's what I'm talking to. Oh my God, it makes so much sense. And I said, okay, well, we're on a roll. I said, so tell me, please, why do I hear people's voices, conversations around me when I fall asleep every night, and have every night for 2.5 years, or 2 years, or 14 months at the time? And because I've always heard snippets, technically it's telepathy, but it's not useful information. It's like, honey, pass the mustard, or, what library book do you want, baby? It's like random. And spirit showed me an image. This is coming back to what you're saying, space-time not being linear. Spirit shows me an image of a satellite dish and said, do you see that you're so sensitive now that other people's thoughts just fall into your dish?
I know that one well.
So we really are all one. But if we lived life knowing that, we couldn't really have our separate experiences.
Right.
It's the duality, what spirit calls the great divide. It's like spirit created form or matter so that we can look at each other and see love. We can't know love without matter, without form. There has to be form. What spirit calls spirit talking to spirit, spirit seeing spirit.
What's that they say that the body, I lost my train of thought, the body and the spirit, that when we dream, some say that's the actual reality, but that this world with the cars and the houses and all the materialism, this is actually the dream. And so they're opposing, the dream is really reality and reality is really a dream. And I've always found that a very good, fascinating idea of how we're living.
Yeah. I think anytime the sense of self gets smaller and we feel in awe of the beauty and magic around us, is closer to our truth than any time when the ego, which is a wonderful thing because it keeps us alive, is forward protecting us, because we need the ego to protect our bodies so that we can live. But when it's back and we're open to everything, or with these psychedelic medicines that open our hearts to everything, and we start to feel connected, or you can do that through meditation, right? It's when the sense of self dissolves that you start to get a glimpse of reality. And in our dreams, we're not aware, usually, unless we're lucid dreaming or astral traveling, we're not aware of, we have a sense of self, but it's not usually in a body. It's kind of free floating. It's like a witness that observes and kind of watch right? And then it might take form, but it might move to another form. It might hop around. So that is consciousness, awareness, embodying different bodies, right?
And that's what, when they talk about reincarnation, that's the closest thing that I feel comfortable with, that I'm sure that consciousness lives on. The vision of me thinking of like the body dies and you jump into another body quickly to be reborn or something, that doesn't seem quite as, it doesn't hit home with me as much as, oh, we become consciousness. We're back into consciousness again. We're back to where we belong. And
Mhm.
that's where we're all connected and that's where everything is happening. And that's the reincarnation. It's not that we all of a sudden look like Gail again in another lifetime. It's
Uh,
that, and so I'm sure my body, we know all our bodies are going to die. We've
right.
watched this all happen, but then something stays on.
Do you call that your soul? What do you call that, Gail?
I don't know if it's the soul or a consciousness or your spirit or,
So they're in Hinduism, they've got the market on this. They've got everything broken down in multiple different levels of detail. We're just starting to awaken to this idea over here in the West, but the soul is the part of consciousness that's individualized.
ah,
The body dies, it's still individualized. And it may choose, I believe, to take another bodied life, because without the body, we can't hug each other. We can't
ah,
kiss each other. We can't eat strawberries, right? Or it may choose to not take another body and to maybe just be individual, but still separate, right?
mhm,
Or it may choose to go all the way back home where there is no separation. You know, what in Hinduism or Buddhism they may call the void or source, or what spirit says before the Big Bang there was stillness. So it may go back. So it's pre anything. It's all opposites collapse. There's no separation. Uh, I asked that question of spirit one time recently because I wanted to know, because I'm trying to figure out what resonates with me. And I personally feel like I have had past lives. I had a dream of me in Nazi Germany as a Jew who was killed in an assembly line,
mhm.
excuse me, a firing squad. And I think that was my last life. Um, but which is probably why I become so passionate about speaking out with injustices in this life, right? I think we carry some of those with us, but I don't have any energy, Gail. I'm so tired. I am so like the thought of doing another one of these, like I'm exhausted. I am so, and I asked Spirit, I was like, because I'm like, I am ready just to go all the way. Don't collect $200, go straight home, you know? And I asked Spirit one time, is reincarnation real? And I got a very quick yes. And I
Mhm.
said, is it for everybody? And I got a very quick no. So I think either it happens because we believe that's how we believe. You know, if I'm born Hindu and my whole life I'm Hindu, uh, if that's my belief system, I probably will get reincarnated. It, or I'd like to think there's a choice.
That's what I was thinking. You spoke about spirit telling you there's always free will.
Oh, right. And
So I'm
I'd
thinking maybe that's the point where the free will is. I wasn't sure if the free will was our or someone else made that decision and said, no, you can't go back into a body. You gotta do this and that, or oh, you gotta get into a body right away because you didn't learn your lessons.
you got more to learn to do, child. But you know, NDEs, I mean, their experiences are all over the spectrum. Some get choices to come back, some are told you're coming back. I'm so sorry, you can't stay here, you know? So so what happens when we do it in reverse, you know, in the four directions? If the sun rises in the east, the life is in the south, sets in the west, and it's the north direction that is between death and rebirth, between winter and spring. So in that north, which is the most mysterious direction to me and so magical. I love not knowing really what happens there, but that's that liminal space in between, right?
Mhm.
Um, I'd like to think that we have free will. I'd
I
like to
think
think we have free
I,
will.
This has been a very, very, very enlightening conversation here today. But we've definitely we're only
That
we're almost
time.
got a couple hours here, but I've had such a wonderful time that I felt like I'm looking at the clock and thinking, oh yeah, we should be upon our hour now, and we're way past our hour. So I just want to see if there was any particular question that I forgot about. Okay, I have one last question, and after you answer it, then we'll close down our show unless there's anything else you want to add. It's of course always my questions are multi-question. There's a possibility you might have an upcoming book, and I was wondering if you wanted to tell the audience um, anything about our topic or sites that you can share that they or can they contact you about your work, or if there's anything you want to tell the audience, like I highly recommend you go to this, or you can reach me or follow me on my Facebook page or my website, uh, anything where they would know how to follow you after we close our show out and find out more about the work you're doing and about when you're going to Czechoslovakia. I'm half Czechoslovakian. I've always wanted to go there. And and that you're considering writing a book. And was that going to be about the experiences we've been talking about today, about the life experiences? Is that what you're thinking about in possibly writing your book? And that's my last question.
Oh, thanks so much, Gail. You have such a great, I like the way your brain works.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
It works in packages. Everything it comes in packages. I like the interconnections. Well, people, I'll start with the easy, the low-hanging fruit. I love people and I love connecting with people. The best ways to connect with me is Instagram. So my Instagram is under my LLC's name, which is betting, like betting cards, betting underscore on underscore love, betting on love. My website is bettingon.love. So if you can just make it to my website, you'll see my Instagram there. The place I'm doing most of my work being put out is my YouTube channel, and I would be so honored if you happen to be interested in my YouTube channel. It started as, like I said, 10 months ago, as just simple videos recording on my couch. But I've had this love affair burst into my life with making short films. So I'm horrible and having so much fun learning as I go along. But that inspiration came from wanting to do a better job of trying to capture the big experiences and teachings I've been getting, and just talking on my couch wasn't cutting it. So I challenged myself to learn how to take the story I'm telling as the foundation and overlay epic imagery and epic music to,
They're
if it's
very
time to
beautiful.
write. Oh, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
also the audience should know that in an incredibly short amount of time, I think you said 10 months or something, you have over 27,000 subscribers. I mean, that's unbelievable. And that's only word of mouth, people watching this and passing. I knew you could make a YouTube thing like my podcast, but I didn't know you could have your own, I didn't think about it as like a YouTube channel. What a great way for you to share your wisdom.
Thank you. I want to be humble. I think it's 24,000, but I've been really blessed to have a lot of support through people subscribing. And I feel so grateful for that. And also, it feels truly like a responsibility
Mhm.
to stay connected to the purpose of my work, which is primarily advocating for voice hearers and sharing the teachings from spirit. So my YouTube channel, I usually publish about once a month, but this year I'm pivoting a little bit more towards getting onto the conference circuit more and doing more podcast interviews and magazine interviews. And I will be speaking in a couple weeks in Bangkok, Thailand at two conferences, one on happiness and one on spirituality, which I'm so privileged to do with Tomorrow People Organization. Um, and then, like I said, there's hopefully an opportunity to partner with InterVoice in October. If not, I'll just go in person and support the other presenters. And then there are several other seeds I've planted along the way. But my heart really is to get onto the conference circuit and speak. Because YouTube is amazing, but I need to be with people.
Yes.
Um, and then was there anything else you asked?
Uh,
Oh,
oh, no sites, your book. If you
oh,
were
you're so sweet.
about writing a book.
I was just going to say I loved collaboration. So if anybody watching this is somebody who runs a podcast or a YouTube channel and wants and likes to do the interviewer part, and especially if you have one on spirituality, I would be honored to connect with you and see if our values and goals overlap. And I really look forward to more collaboration, more interviews. That's funny you say that book, Gail, because there's a humorous love-hate relationship I have with with writing. Um,
Uh-huh.
uh, I think most people have a love-hate relationship with their creativity, but um, I think the name of the book is going to be There Is No Limit to Compassion.
Mhm.
And my guess is that it would be sharing Spirit's teachings, because I think that can have some of the most profound impact, like globally, and sharing the stories from Spirit. I mean, it's changed my life.
And
Uh,
you have years of your dreams of teaching already written, so part of the book is already right there in front of you.
oh, well, I mean, thank you. I don't know when it's going to start happen, but I'm sure I'll feel it when it does. Usually you get the pokes from the universe, like, hey,
Right.
hey, hey, and you're like, oh man, enough already. Okay.
I know I've been poked for a long time and I finally finished, but it's a very interesting journey, the book writing experience. Now I'm like, well, now I'm finished, but I don't really feel like trying to do anything now. Or do I want to self-publish or do I want to go la la la? And so it's a very up and down process.
Yeah. You
And
love page?
yes, and I found that what you're saying, when people poked me or had an interest, it gave me the energy I needed to work on the book and to make things, to complete.
Mm,
And it's very hard process to do on yourself by yourself alone. You really
mm,
want to collaborate with other people to read your material and to give you feedback. And it's really not a one person thing, even though it seems like that. Uh, anyway, I wish you great luck in that area. And I think you have a lot of wonderful things to share. And I know they're not coming all from you, they're coming through you, but you have some wonderful information coming through you that you want to get it out in the universe. And this is the way to do it: conferences, podcasts, write a book.
mm.
And also, I was told once you have the book, that gives you more open access to all these other conferences because they like to know you have a book to sell.
You're a published author.
Yes,
So
yes.
funny how our capitalistic economy
I,
works.
I,
Check off these items on this list. It's
yes, I know.
entertaining.
And I will send you the link to this show if you want to put it on your website or share it wherever you want to share our site and our story here together today. That'll be wonderful. I'll give you the link when we post it, and you can do whatever you like, partially it, part of it, whatever you want to do. It's up to you.
I would be honored to post on my channel.
Oh, that's very sweet. So, is there anything else you want to share before I close out? We've had a very wonderful time that it made the time pass by so fast because we know there's really no time.
You're so funny, Gail. Gail, you are such a joy. My time with you, I think I've laughed the whole interview, for the last 2 hours. So thank you so much for your beautiful energy and happiness and your smile. And yeah, just the work you're doing is when I found you, I just thought, what? People are doing this? That's amazing. Thank you for creating a platform, a virtual meeting space for people to talk about really, really important things, especially I think the world needs like more love and more understanding and more wisdom and more holding safe spaces. So thank you so much for it's such a beautiful creative thing you have over here. And it's such a joy to be part of it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to a small, medium, at large podcast because I've had an absolutely wonderful Saturday with you. And I could go on for hours and hours, but I have to go use the restroom by now.
Good. That's your
And
intuition
yes, and I
and
don't
your
want
body.
Yes, this shouldn't end our, I have to tell you that there are people I have connected with on this podcast that are now dear friends. I flew out to Colorado to meet Donna Ribadow and Sean McNamara, and now we're in our each other's lives on a regular, I mean, we have a wonderful connection. I'm just saying that there's people in Europe. When I go to Europe, there's a couple of guests I had from London that we're hoping to hook up and we'll either have lunch or dinner together. So I feel like this podcast also enables me to connect with like kindred spirits that you may not find, standing next to you in the grocery store necessarily. So if this is how I find and bring these other amazing people into my life and into my living room here, I can't thank the podcast enough. So I'm very appreciative as well.
That sense of belonging is precious. I'm
Ah,
so glad that it's gifted you that. Yeah.
so I'm gonna end our show now and just hang on for a sec while I close us out. I want to thank all you listeners for joining us here today. I want to say that we've had a wonderful visit here with our guest. I hope you'll look at her sites. They'll also be on the description so that if you haven't written it down, you don't have to worry. You'll see it there on the description of the show. And I want to say, remember, everyone, share your stories because stories can heal. And have an absolutely wonderful, wonderful week. And we'll see you again soon. Bye.